Hello everybody, my name is George O'Brien and today I'm going to guide you through a presentation which highlights the importance of sports psychologists understanding group dynamics and individual differences, and also the way in which these two factors can have a great impact on the effectiveness and outcome of service delivery. Throughout this presentation I have tried to include visual aids of a slightly comical nature to avoid overloading you with information and complex diagrams, but I assure you that they are all related in one way or another. I hope you enjoy. There will be four main sections to this presentation. Firstly, we will look at what is needed to be successful as a sports psychologist and whether it is enough to follow some simple guidelines. We will then move on to factors which can have an impact on the effectiveness of the training programs implemented by the sports psychologists. Finally, we look at individual differences and group dynamics in more detail and use case studies to demonstrate possible scenarios that sports psychologists would have to work within. The general aim of any professional offering the service to members of the public is to reach and achieve the goals or objectives set out from the beginning. According to Pokrzywinski et al. 2004, in terms of sports psychology, the aim of the sports psychologist is to apply psychological theories, principles and techniques in order to encourage psychobehavioral changes in athletes. Such psychobehavioral changes are made in order to enhance personal growth, the quality of the sport experience, and most importantly, the sporting performance. Anderson et al. 2004 developed a framework of factors that are vital to the effective practice of sports psychology. The use of this framework has also been supported by more recent research by Todd and Anderson in 2005. Personable relates to having the personality and interpersonal skills to develop a collaborative relationship between the client and the professional. Provision of a good practice service means that consultants must ensure they consider the practicalities of their chosen method of consultancy in order to provide a beneficial service. Effective consultants are easy to talk to and are willing to actively listen to the athlete client, therefore demonstrating good communication skills. Possessing broad knowledge and experience of sport and sports psychology is vital. Sports psychologists must have an expert understanding of theoretical principles related to the practice of sports psychology in order to provide a fantastic service. Exhibiting professional skills is not only about having the ability to demonstrate and justify the use of their own chosen mental skills, but also requires the practitioner to be approachable and perceptive. Finally, honesty and trust are two characteristics which encourage the client to have total faith in the sports psychologist and feel confident that their disclosures will remain confidential. So, does following the guidelines set out by Anderson guarantee you to succeed as a sports psychologist? Unfortunately not. Although the framework mentioned previously effectively highlights the basic guidelines for sports psychologists to follow, this alone is not enough. In terms of mental skills training and treatment, there are no universally effective strategies. Practitioners must be able to contextualize their theoretical knowledge and applied skills in order to implement a strategy which is unique to the specific demands of the individual or team receiving support. As mentioned before, it has been suggested that the work of a sports psychologist should be directly related to the behavior of the particular individual or team receiving professional help. In order to gain an understanding of a specific case, it is important to consider both individual differences and group dynamics, and the influence these factors have on the success of the strategies implemented by the sports psychologist. An individual difference is anything that marks a person as a distinct and unique human being. The constructs of individual differences refer to dimensions of enduring personal characteristics that apply to everybody but differ to a degree. In other words, they concern stable and systematic deviations from a normative blueprint. Dornvey, 2008, concludes that the inherited genetic information sets broad limits to one's development, and within these limits, what individuals actually become depends on their environment. Forsythe, 2009, describes group dynamics as the influential activities, processes, operations, and changes that transpire within a group of two or more people. The three examples of individual differences between athletes that we will be looking at today are emotion, intelligence, and skill. Emotion is defined as a state of mind in which feeling, sentiment, or attitude is predominant. A prime example of emotional differences can be seen when looking at how well athletes recover from injury. The emotional reactions that the injured athlete experiences will vary dramatically. According to Quackenbush and Crossman, 1994, emotions such as fear, anger, anxiety and depression are felt by injured athletes, as well as decreased self-esteem and feelings of separation and loss of identity. Not only will the degree of negativity felt by the individuals vary, but also the way in which they control and overcome these thought processes. Therefore, the length of time it will take for an athlete to progress through to the recovery stage depends on his or her emotional stability. Intelligence, or more specifically emotional intelligence, refers to the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions in order to discriminate and use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. According to ZZ Diener and Hirschscore in 2003, it has been found that emotionally intelligent individuals respond better to psychological skills training due to their ability to see the relationship between strategies such as self-talk and emotions, and the effect of emotions on behavior and performance. Furthermore, a meta-analytic study by Mayer and Fletcher 2007 has shown that measures of emotional intelligence are associated with enhanced well-being, stress management, and performance. Therefore, effectiveness of this psychological skills training very much depends on the athlete's level of emotional intelligence. The definition of skill still remains to be the learned ability to bring about predetermined results with maximum certainty, often with minimum outlay of time, energy, or both. In terms of psychological skills training, it is important to take into account the performance level of the client. Amateur performers may respond very differently to elite athletes. A study by Callow and Hardy 2007 used the Sport Imagery Questionnaire and the State Sport Confidence Inventory to explore the relationship between imagery type and confidence, using skill level as the moderating variable. It was shown that in the lower standard sample of players, mastery image and imagery related to strategies of the game accounted for the majority of the variance. Meanwhile, with the higher standard sample, goal achievement orientated imagery was the only significant predictor of variance in confidence. Before implementing a mental skills training program, it is important to know the client's playing standard and to also have knowledge of their motivational climate and level of expertise. Furthermore, it is also likely that elite athletes would have received mental skills training previously in their career, so they will have experience and knowledge in the field. This means that the sports psychologist may be able to offer more complex mental skills training than would be offered to an amateur athlete. Therefore, it is not only physical skill relating to playing standard that is important, but also psychological skill gained from previous mental skills training. In terms of sports psychology treatment, it is important to assess the individual differences of the athlete receiving advice, but with team performance it is also vital to gain an understanding of the group dynamics of the team. While the importance of understanding individual difference has been explained in terms of how the sports psychologist will make decisions on which psychological skills training to use and how to implement these programs, group dynamics can be explained by being seen as another psychological factor affecting performance, and therefore another highly important area of focus. Group dynamics can influence the behavior, cognitions, and attitudes of members of a group, which will in turn affect the team performance. The following slide will explain examples of group dynamics in sports teams and why they should be seen as vital factors to consider and improve when aiming to improve performance. The examples of group dynamics in sports we will be discussing today are cohesion, communication, and group size. Caron, Brawley and Widmer, 1998, described team cohesion as a dynamic process reflected in the tendency for a group to stick together and remain united in the pursuit of instrumental objectives and/or the satisfaction of member effective needs. Social cohesion relates to the degree to which members of a team like each other and enjoy satisfaction from being members of the team, according to Cox, 2002. Task cohesion, on the other hand, is the degree to which members of a team work together to achieve a specific and identifiable goal. Cox also suggested that team cohesion has been found to increase performance, a finding which has been supported by meta-analytic research conducted by Evans and Dion, 1991. The review of past research examining group cohesion and performance by Evans and Dion indicated a positive relationship between cohesion and performance. The average cohesive group performed 18 percentile points above the average non-cohesive group. Therefore, when attempting to offer a strategy to a team client, it would be advised to measure the cohesion of the team using questionnaires such as the Team Psychology Questionnaire prior to the treatment in order to make a judgment of where the issues are arising from. Communication describes verbal and non-verbal complex processes which are inescapable and irreversible, defined simply as social interactions through messages, according to Fisk, 1990. While channels of communication for individual sports are relatively easy to witness and judge, the sheer number of members within a team generating and responding to communication from a number of sources makes it very difficult for the sports psychologist to understand where the message is being lost. It is therefore important for the practitioner to not only work with the actual members of the team, but the coach and support staff also. Open and honest communication has been highlighted as a core component of building a successful team by Yukelson, 1997. Furthermore, trainers have rated good interpersonal communication skills as an effective psychological technique for facilitating athlete recovery, according to research by Weiss et al., 1991. The final construct of group dynamics we will look into is group size. The term is obviously self-explanatory and simply refers to the number of members within a team and how that can have an effect on psychological processes and performance. In terms of explaining the immediate effect of group size on team performance, we will consider the theory of social loafing. Social loafing is the tendency for individuals to expend less effort when working collectively than when working individually. A meta-analysis of 78 studies conducted by Carreau, 1993, identified a large number of variables which have been found to have a relationship with social loafing. Such variables include evaluation potential, expectations of co-workers' performance, and task meaningfulness. I will now guide you through two case studies, one focusing on individual differences and the other on group dynamics. For these two case studies, we are going to assume that the sports psychologist has followed the basic guidelines highlighted in Anderson's framework of successful practice. This way I can hope to clearly demonstrate to you the effects that individual differences and group dynamics have on sports psychology practice without taking other variables into consideration. In our first case study, we will be focusing on the aspects of individual differences which have been discussed previously. Here we have Emma, who is a tennis player competing at the elite level. She has been entered in many competitions since her LTA ranking, but is failing to get through the final stages of the competition. She is particularly struggling when it comes to returning serves. She has received help from a sports psychologist before to help with her anxiety issues as a teenager, but would like some additional support to help her stop choking under pressure and climb the rankings. Now, as we can see, Emma is playing at a very high standard and therefore understands the mechanics of each movement and shot played in her tennis matches very clearly. She has also suffered with psychological issues before, which she was able to bounce back from with the help of a sports psychologist. This means she is able to understand the benefits of psychological skills training and is willing to put the time and effort into the program. Emma clearly possesses a high level of emotional stability, emotional intelligence and skill, so it would not be seen as necessary to offer her an oversimplified mental skills training program. An example of a method which could be implemented is the use of an holistic cue word. The logistics behind the treatment is the evidence which suggests that choking is triggered by thinking too much. Now, although paying attention and concentrating on the mechanics of your performance is beneficial for a beginner, the same has not been found for elite athletes. For more experienced players, the brain automatically judges every detail of a particular stroke or shot. Therefore, analysing movement confuses and overcomplicates the shot, causing even more stress for the player and thus affecting performance. In this case, Emma is having a particular trouble returning serves, which may suggest that she's doing exactly that, overthinking shots which she has already memorised the mechanics and technique for. Gucciardi et al. 2010 has tested the use of a cue word and found very interesting results. The athletes in the study were asked to play under 3 different conditions. In the first, they were told to fixate on specific components of their swing. The second condition consisted focusing on irrelevant words, and in the third, they were told to focus on general aspects of their intended movement, also known as the holistic cue word. So, for example, Rather than contemplating the precise position of the wrist, they contemplated descriptive adjectives such as open or closed. This study found that when the athletes contemplated an holistic cue word, their performance was no longer affected by confusion and anxiety. Because the positive adjectives were vague and generic, they didn't cause the athletes to lose the flow of expert performance or overrule their automatic brain. In this second case study, we will be focusing on the areas of group dynamics which have been described and explained previously, rather than explaining why we would use certain psychological skills training methods as we did with the last study. This time our client is called Dave. He is a midfielder playing for Bristol Rovers. He has been a member of the team for a few seasons now and gets on with the rest of the players really well. Although there is a mix of old and new, it has been relatively easy for them all to bond, and they have a mutual respect for one another's role in the team. However, Dave is still underperforming for some reason. In the last 10 games, he has not scored any goals and has only been involved in the setup of 2. He is physically fit and plays very well in training when being monitored by the coaches. A number of the support staff have been trying to help him overcome any issues with his performance, but it doesn't seem to be helping. Now, from this case we can clearly see that cohesion is not the issue. He gets on with his teammates socially and also respects them as players. However, the fact that he is able to perform to his best ability in training when he is being closely analysed suggests that there may be an element of social loafing. Furthermore, he did mention that he's been receiving help from a number of people, which may be leaving him confused due to the variance in instructions given to him from the different forms of communication. Now, as the sports psychologist trying to tackle the causes of underperforming, the first point of call may be to simply speak to the head coach in order to suggest that Dave may be best off with one designated mentor who will explain his role during the match clearly so that he's not left feeling confused and swamped. The sports psychologists could also work with Dave themselves in order to address the issue of social loafing by using methods recommended and supported by valid research, as we have just done with the first case study. Not forgetting, of course, that we must take into account Dave's individual needs also. In this presentation, we have gone over the basic framework developed by Anderson of how to be a successful sports psychologist, before explaining why it is vital that sports psychologists also take into account factors such as group dynamics and individual differences. Finally, we have looked at case studies in order to give an example of situations where the sports psychologist would need to consider these 2 factors. I must, however, make it clear that this presentation only touches upon a few examples within sports psychology. The area of sports psychology is vast, and it would therefore be impossible to clearly explain each construct within this short presentation. Before this presentation ends, there is something I would like to leave you to think about. Throughout this presentation, I have referred to individual differences and group dynamics as separate concepts for sports psychologists to consider. However, is it possible that there could be a relationship between the 2? For instance, when treating an individual with anxiety issues, could the dynamics of the group of people whom he or she competes alongside alter the effectiveness of the mental skills training program? Furthermore, is it possible that individual differences, such as emotional stability, intelligence and skill, can have a diverse effect on the dynamics of the group, and therefore jeopardize the work of the sports psychologist, trying to combat the effects of examples such as social loafing? Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have benefited from this presentation and gained new knowledge in the field of sports psychology.